Hi, everybody. So we are going to do a lesson now that will help you to plan the body paragraphs in your Unit 3 essay. You had a previous lesson that talked about planning the summary, and now we're going to work on the body paragraphs. If you remember, here's our planning document that you'll be working on. And, it says right up here that we generally don't plan in the order in which the material will appear in the final essay. So we don't usually start with the introduction in our planning, even though that's the first part of the essay. So the previous lesson went over how to do your summary for paragraph 2. And now we're going to go over how to plan the bulk of your essay, which is paragraphs 3 through 5, the response paragraphs. And then in another lesson, I'll review information on introductions and conclusions. All right. So this is a document you're working on. And I showed you an example also. I believe this is the example. Here we go. And one of the things I want you to notice on this example is if there is something that you need help with, don't just leave it blank. Write me a note. I need help with this. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so this is what we're working on, these response paragraph plans, okay? So just to keep me kind of on track with everybody, I have my slideshow, and then we'll look over at the sample, okay? So the first thing you want to make sure you're doing for your body paragraphs is coming up with a good, clear topic sentence for the paragraph. Topic sentences are going to be your friend as you go through this class, English 102. Even in my English 122 class, I have students working on topic sentences. If you're writing papers for other classes, topic sentences are really helpful to help you organize your ideas and make sure that everything is where it belongs in the essay. And then they're also helpful to your reader to kind of follow along with your ideas, right? So they do both of those jobs, right? They help you to organize and they help the reader to follow along. Most of your topic sentences are going to follow this pattern, right? So one thing you want to do is clearly state the topic of that particular paragraph. Why are you grouping ideas in this paragraph? What's the point of this paragraph, or the thread that's tying it all together, right? The other thing your topic sentence will probably do is repeat key ideas from the thesis statement to kind of tie everything in the whole essay together. And then there's usually going to be some language that will transition from the previous paragraph into this one. That sometimes doesn't get added in until you start drafting the essay, but eventually that will be there. So these are just general ideas for topic sentences. What you're going to be doing in this essay in particular, or if you ever do another summary response essay, you want to make sure that you're mentioning your author's name, the R2 author's name, because that's that repetition of key ideas. You're responding to this author's ideas. That author should be repeated in your topic sentences, all right? One of the points, a general point that the author makes that you're responding to in that paragraph, that's establishing the focus for the paragraph. And also your general response to that point. So like you and the author and some point that the author makes should all be appearing in this topic sentence. Let's have a look at the sample paper or the sample outline. So notice here it says Thompson and Hickey, so that's the author's names, accurately reveal the dependency on technology displayed by Americans. So the point that they made in their article that the student is responding to is that they revealed the dependency on technology that Americans have. Now, where the student's opinion is coming in here is with the word accurately. Oops. All right, it's basically saying that the student agrees with these authors. So you can write a topic sentence that says, I agree with Forbes when he says that the program is bad for the economy. And that's fine to do that, even, especially in an outline, because we can always revise later. But we want to try to get the focus off of you in this paper. So we want to try to work away from using first person pronouns if we can. So a way to do that is to, instead of saying, I agree with the author, say the author is correct when he states this, right? Or the author is mistaken, right? If you disagree, he's mistaken when he says this, or he's over exaggerating, right? So you want to try to get your opinion in, but maybe without using first person pronouns. Again, in the outline, in this plan, if you have the I agree, I disagree, that's fine. And if you want to work away from that, we can do that when you're drafting. So there's one topic sentence. Here's another one. Furthermore, now the transition, you might not know that transition yet as you're drafting because you might not know how the paragraphs are going to connect. So this one happens to have a transition. Doesn't this have a strike through thing on it? Okay, draw. But you don't have to have that yet, okay? So Thompson and Hickey correctly suggest that society is accepting more and more surveillance of their personal lives for the sake of national security. So again, we have the authors' names. Here is the point that the authors make. Society is accepting more surveillance for the sake of national security. And the student's opinion here is that they're correct. The student agrees with them, okay? And what we're looking at as the paragraph continues is this is the focus for this paragraph. So everything the student includes in this paragraph will be about this idea, whether it's a quote from the authors or why that student agrees with the authors. All right, this is establishing the focus for the paragraph. And then we'll go to the third one. Despite these apparent benefits, Thompson and Hickey rightfully caution Americans that new technology can open doors to new peril. So again, this transition we might not know yet. So if you don't have that just yet, that's fine. Here's the authors. Here's what they do or what they say in the article. And the student agrees with them that new technology can open doors to new peril. All right. So that's what we're looking for in the topic sentences. Okay. So that's a really important thing to include on the outline, because remember, one of my goals with the outline when I review it is to see if you have a clear focus for each paragraph and to make sure there's not going to be any overlap among the paragraphs. So we want to make sure that each paragraph is putting out its own distinct point and that it's developable, it can be developed, okay? So that's a really important part of this, right? So your topic sentences, I did give you kind of a topic sentence. I called it a stepping stone activity in the week 8, the week 8 lessons, learning materials. So that might help you to come up with topic sentences as well. And if you need help, let me know. All right. So the next thing we're going to look at, it looks like I did have a lesson on topic sentences. Yeah. The next thing we'll look at is how to develop the paragraph. So once you've established a focus for each paragraph, now we want to see what information is going to go in there. So now we're going to gather evidence. So I do want you to have at least one quote or paraphrase from R2 in each paragraph, right? Now, sometimes that'll be challenging if you're writing about something that the author doesn't include, but it's possible to do that, right? There's almost always something that you can say, like he only says this, but he doesn't talk about this at all. Or it might be just more general, right? So he talks about all the problems with the program, but he never discusses the benefits. But we do want to try to get at least one quote or paraphrase from R2 in each of the body paragraphs, all right? Now you're probably going to also need a second quote to really be able to develop this paragraph fully. Unless you have a lot to say about that one quote, you're probably going to need to have a second quote. So that second quote can either come from R2, or this might be where you bring in your R3, right? And then, okay. So let's have a look at the sample. I moved things around in my slideshow a little bit, so I was a little confused for a moment. All right, where's our sample? Okay. So remember that once we establish the focus for the paragraph, So if we look at this first one, they reveal the dependency on technology displayed by Americans. So the quote that we bring in from R2 needs to be someplace where they do this, right? So the student who wrote this used this quote: "The cameras are familiar to most people, perhaps even comforting to some." Okay, they reveal the dependency on technology displayed by Americans, and this is where it kind of says that they are dependent, and Americans are dependent. It's familiar, comforting to see these cameras around, right? Now, the other quote that the student brought in here, so we're looking at dependency on technology displayed by Americans. We have this quote, and the student brought it in from their R3. "Cell phones to credit cards to web browsers that make our lives easier and have the secondary effect of permitting us to be tracked. They're not spy technologies, but they might as well be." So again, this first part is really about the dependency that we have on technology. The student continued here, and that probably is going to tie into some point that the student wants to make. Okay? All right, so you want to find, now in this example, the student has a quote from R2 and R3 in each paragraph. That might not happen for you. Okay, so you don't have to have a quote from R3 in each paragraph. You only have to have it in one of your paragraphs. If you can make it work in other paragraphs, that's probably going to be helpful to you, but you don't have to. All right, so we have the quoted material. Let me look at another example. Thompson and Hickey correctly suggest that society is accepting more and more surveillance of their personal lives for the sake of national security. Here's one where the student did a paraphrase, and it would probably be helpful at this stage for you to include the original passage, the original quote over here, so that I can see how well you paraphrased, especially if you're having trouble with the paraphrasing assignment. This way, if there's any problems with it, we catch it here instead of in the final draft, right? We don't want that to happen. So open debates developed over how, this is the original quote, and the student chose to paraphrase here. Open debates developed over how much personal privacy Americans were willing to relinquish for the promise of safety from terrorism. Nevertheless, the act was renewed in 2006, and it's a couple sentences earlier. It talks about the Patriot Act. So the authors mentioned the concerns people had with the USA Patriot Act in 2001 and the invasion of privacy it seemed to allow. Yet later they explained that despite these concerns, the act was still renewed in 2006. Little bit of an echo here I'm noticing. Here, the act was still renewed in 2006. So, it could be a better paraphrase, but it's okay. All right. So I would highly recommend that you do this, include a paraphrase and include the original passage so that I can check those for you. Okay. And then the evidence 2, what's this one? Is they're accepting more surveillance of their personal lives for the sake of national security. Cell phones and transit cards are being used to track criminals. Video cameras seem obvious, but they're a cornerstone of the surveillance society, and they've proved an important weapon in law enforcement's arsenal. Personal lives for the sake of national security. So we want to make sure that the quotes are touching back on what the topic sentence says. Okay, so we're being very careful as we add evidence to make sure that the evidence is directly linked or can be directly linked to that topic sentence. All right, so we're being very selective or careful in our quoting, making sure that it fits. Now, I just said selective in our quoting. I will say that in this outline and probably in the essay, now that I think about it, the student is probably overusing quoted material, because I would recommend that in a paper of this length, you have 2 direct quotations at the most, and the rest should be paraphrased. If you have more than that, it's not the end of the world. But if you want to be doing your best work as a writer, remember the lesson on quoting being very limited and very selective in your use of quotations. Keep that in mind as you're deciding how to bring source material into this paper. All right. Now, the last thing you'll see on the planner here are these little snippets before and after each piece of evidence. So this is going to take us into, okay, there's the quote selectively, paraphrase effectively. Okay. This is going to take us into a strategy that's called C-set. And this is a strategy that we use to blend source material in with your own writing, okay? So what C-set stands for is what you see here. The C is the claim, and that'll be your topic sentence. So you'll only have one C in a paragraph, right? Topic sentence. And then for each piece of evidence that you bring into that paragraph, you want to have something from you before it and something from you after it. So we don't want to have a habit of just dropping quotes and paraphrases in without interacting with those quotes and paraphrases. Okay. The setup might be a little bit hard to work into the outline because sometimes we don't know what that setup is until we start kind of putting sentences together. I think that's as far as I get with this. Okay. The evidence is going to be the quote or the paraphrase from the source. The tie-in is where you are really going to show me your thoughts. So the tie-in should be developed pretty thoroughly and thoughtfully. And I would want you to include some notes on the outline that show what you might include in that tie-in. So let me bring over the example again. Okay. So accurately reveal the dependency on technology displayed by Americans. So here, the student just put will add later. The setup, it's sometimes hard to put on the outline because, as I said, it's usually kind of the flow of the sentence. But what I will remind you is that you definitely want to have something leading into the quote when you start drafting. You don't want this quote just popping up out of nowhere. So we'll talk more about setups when we get into the drafting lesson. But let's talk about the tie-in a little bit here, okay? So the tie-in is kind of you explaining why you agree, disagree, or whatever your reaction was to the author. So up here, if we have the topic sentence that they accurately reveal the dependency on technology displayed by Americans, the student is saying that they agree with Thompson and Hickey that Americans are dependent on technology. This tie-in here is basically going to explain why they agree, all right? So dependency. The other thing that might happen in your tie-in is you'll pick up on some language from the quote. So like this idea of comforting. So people find technology comforting because it helps them function and can protect them. And this will probably be developed a little bit more in the actual essay, but I just want to see what your ideas are here. Okay? It doesn't have to be this big, long, drawn out thing, but just what do you think you're going to say in this part? Setup 2, you can just write will add later if you want to. Everyone uses cell phones to credit cards to web browsers that make our lives easier and have the secondary effect of permitting us to be tracked. They're not spy technologies, but they might as well be. So again, the student is agreeing with this idea that Americans are very accepting and comfortable with technology, dependent on technology. So that's what you want to have in the tie-in, right? The tie-in is explaining why you agree or disagree or whatever with what you have here and how it ties back to the topic sentence. So this person wrote, it seems like everything's online, health records, job applications. I have to download an app when I join a gym. How much information am I giving up by using these tools to make my life easier? All right. So just some notes, what they think they're going to be including in this section. Now, I will show you that if you are using personal experiences to respond to the author's ideas, you can use first-person pronouns in that section, but it's only if you're writing about your personal experiences. If you're writing about something else, some observation, some hypothetical scenario, something like that to develop your paragraph, you probably don't need to use first-person pronouns. We can work on that in the revising and editing stage, but as you're going through this, and I'm showing you this example, that's why it's okay that the student has I here. So what I'm going to ask you to include when you do this, topic sentences are very important. What quotes or paraphrases do you think you'll be including in that paragraph? If you are including a paraphrase, give me the original quote as well. You can skip the setups for now. We'll talk more about that with the drafting bit. But I do want to see what you have in mind for your tie-in, why you are having that particular reaction to the author's point. right? Agree, disagree, some other belief. I want to see what you have in mind here. So I hope that makes sense and helps you to plan your body paragraphs. And if you have questions, certainly let me know. All right. See you in the next lesson. Bye.